Morning, good afternoon, good evening, whoever you are, wherever you are, whenever it is for you. For me, it's just past midnight on Saturday, October the 5th, 2024. That makes this the news for Friday, October the 4th, 2024, day 955 of Vladimir Putin's war of aggression against the people of Ukraine. I'm Peter Alexievich, and this is the Live at 5 from Kyiv. Hey, Tisno, we're back. Darlene, how you doing? Hey, Russell Kennedy. So sorry about that, guys. We seem to have lost internet access here in Kyiv, which is unusual, highly unusual. Even when the power's out, I have internet access. But it looks like the internet is down. And so I've switched over to the Ukrainian phone and I'm using the cell service. Folks are coming back in. Hey, Jimbo. Hey, Paul Molman. Hey, Fitzy. Joey the Lips is here. Robert Stewart Key. How do you do, Robert? Okay. So real quick, because I don't know where we cut out. The interface was frozen for a while and I was talking. So very quickly, let me just review a couple of things. The leading economic indicators from Russia are not good. They're bad. Russia is now on a barter system with Pakistan, trading chickpeas for rice and mandarins and potatoes. The ruble is in the toilet. It appears to be in free fall. It's down in the last 7 weeks since the Kursk incursion. It's gone from 1 to 85, $1 US to 85 rubles, to $1 US to 95.25 rubles. And the Yale School of Management has declared the ruble dead as a currency for international exchange. Nobody wants it. Nobody's interested in it. As we saw from the recent implosion of the Russian bond market, where the Russians tried to raise 1 trillion rubles in bond sales, but only managed to sell 630 billion rubles worth. Now, guys, you think about that. That's a country the size of Russia that couldn't raise $10 billion. There aren't enough people in the world that still believe in Russia that they could raise $10 billion. That's where Russia's at. It's a bad scene, man, and it is only going to get worse. The whole notion of a BRICS common currency is now dead. None of those nations are going to want to be saddled with the nightmare of the imploding economy that is the Russian Federation. 2 oil depots were hit last night. One in Perm, some 2,000 kilometers from Ukraine. We're not sure if that was partisan activity or a drone strike. And then another just 300 kilometers deep inside of Russia in Voronezh, near where we saw the attack against the airfield yesterday that took out the storehouse of glide bombs at that airfield. Taking out those glide bombs is critical. The Russians are claiming that they blew an ODAB 9000 thermobaric bomb on Vovchansk. There is no evidence to indicate that that is true. There is no record of a heavy bomber in the area. There is, however, the record of an Su-35, which can be adapted to drop a Fab 3000 bomb. And it's likely that that's what was dropped over Vovchansk, though we don't really know. Video has emerged of a Dragon drone taking out a Russian tank on the front lines. Western officials, the UK Intelligence Defense Report, says that September was the second deadliest on record for Russian forces, with an average of 1,200 KIA or WIA a day lost. 40% of those in Pokrovsk. 40%, 14,000 men in 1 month lost on that advance. The Kursk counteroffensive, after a stuttering start, does appear to have begun, with over 20 armored vehicle column being destroyed southeast of Sudza. But the Russians did make some marginal gains, taking back some Ukrainian positions in that region. Up in Kupiansk, it appears that the Russians are advancing to the Oskil River. It is thought that if they reach the river, they will not try to cross it, but rather they will expand north and south. That's the most likely outcome of that expansion, if they can keep it up. French Ministry of Defense has announced another 12 Caesar self-propelled howitzers to Ukraine. This is on top of the 3 that the Belgians promised yesterday. So that's another 15 self-propelled howitzers. 6 North Korean officers were unalived in Donetsk, and 3 of their soldiers were wounded. So there was talk back in June about the North Koreans sending engineers to Ukraine. It appears that they have arrived, and the first casualties are being reported. It is believed that these engineers have been brought in. We say engineers. It's likely what it really is North Korean slave labor to rebuild places like Mariupol. That appears to be what it really is. However, this Ukrainian strike against Russian forces, against a command and control post and training ground in Donetsk, is said to have essentially decapitated the North Korean mission to Ukraine by taking out the 6 officers that were there to watch the Russians parade at a training ground in the middle of a war zone. Atesh in Crimea, the Atesh partisan group, is reporting that S-300 missiles are being rushed into the area, likely in anticipation of a major strike coming from Ukraine against Crimea. Now, what that strike will be is unclear, but there is video of S-300s on trucks coming into Crimea. In Kherson, the human hunt is escalating. We've talked about this on this channel. If this is news to you, hold on to your hat, because it's perverse and demented. But it does appear that the Russian forces in Kherson are using drones to hunt civilians at a rate of 60 to 100 strikes a day. In September alone, 226 civilians in Kherson were struck by drones, just going about their daily business. In the Kyiv Post today, there is an interview with a mother of 2 who was out cycling when a drone got on her tail and attempted to unalive her during her morning bicycle run. Mother of 2, trying to live her life. The Kremlin has decided to remove the Taliban from its list of terrorist organizations. How about that? Don't raise the standards of the world. No. Let's lower them. Let's go back to a world where a cat has more rights than a woman does, because that's the situation in Afghanistan today, right? A cat is free to sit out on the stoop and sun herself. No Afghani woman is, not anymore, not under the Taliban. But they're not terrorists, according to the Kremlin. Well, it takes one to know one, baby. Western intelligence sources are reporting that they do not believe that the Iranian Fath 360 missiles that had recently been delivered to Russia were at the Torapets arsenal when it was hit last week. So it appears that the Iranian missiles are still alive and well somewhere inside of Russia, and were not hit in any of those attacks last week, at least not as far as we know. Politico is reporting that 177 Ukrainian POWs have died in Russian captivity. There are thousands of Ukrainian POWs that are currently subject to the daily and systemic torture that accompanies life in a Russian POW camp. The Prosecutor General's Office of Ukraine has evidence of 93 POWs that have been executed on the battlefield in this conflict, and points to the fact that 80% of those were this year alone, just since January 1st. The Russians are no longer taking prisoners, it appears, which of course is a war crime and a violation of the Geneva Convention to which the USSR was signatory. Kyiv got hit by 2 FAB glide bombs today. No reports of anybody unalived, some injuries. The Swedish, we talked about the Swedish armored combat boats, the CV-90s. They have arrived in Ukraine and are in service now. Now, what the Ukrainians are going to do with them is another question. Although some kind of an offensive on Crimea seems inevitable. One-third, the Czech initiative has delivered 1/3 of the promised ammo. The Ukrainians are hoping that the Czech initiative will go into 2025, but the Czech initiative continues on track to deliver at least 10,000 shells a month through 2024. Saudi Arabia, now this is big news. This is really big news. And I'm not entirely certain what to make of it. Saudi Arabia is going to increase oil production, even as prices are falling. Saudi Arabia increases oil production, prices will fall further. The Saudis seem to need the money, and so they are going to start pumping again. If the international price of oil falls and Russia's chief lifeline, which currently Urals crude is at $66 a barrel, if I'm not mistaken. The last price I saw for it was $66 a barrel. And it costs between $42 and $45 a barrel to get it out of the ground. Then you have to add $12 per barrel for transport, for shipping. That means that the break-even price for Russian oil today is between $54 and $59 a barrel. That's the break-even price. We are headed to a world where every barrel that Russia sells will cost it money. And that makes this whole war thing even less sustainable. Without that money coming in, they start losing money, they're going to lose this war, period. End of conversation. So now look, Putin and MSB are buddy-buddy. I can't quite figure out, is this just Saudi Arabian self-interest? Are they in a cash crunch themselves and need the money? Are they worried about the destabilization of the Middle East by the war there? It's unclear to me. But very clearly, their restrictions on production have helped Vladimir Putin. And again, they're buddies. Upping production is going to hurt Vladimir Putin. Could it be that Saudi Arabia's own self-interest simply trumps Could it be that Saudi Arabia's own self-interest simply trumps their friendship with the Kremlin? Certainly, it does. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I just don't know what the pressing self-interest is right now that would get them to fuck over the Kremlin the way that they're doing. because this is going to fuck over the Kremlin big time. There's no doubt about that. Meanwhile, for its part, Russia continues to demonstrate its thoughtfulness, its modernity, and its clairvoyance into the future by proposing a childlessness tax. If you are a single person without children, you are going to have to pay an extra tax inside of Russia next year, because these are the kind of thoughtful progressive reforms that we can count on from the Russian Federation. This I do not understand at all. The Google Play Store has removed RuTube, the Russian YouTube alternative, from the Play Store everywhere but in the United States. Addison, that's simply not accurate. Addison says down here today, careful, Paul. Paul, be careful with that quote. Because Ural's crude is under sanction, many times what you're looking at is old data. It'll say delayed by so many weeks next to it. You may not have today's price. Addison says down here, they asked them to cut production to raise oil prices, but Russia won't. So they're saying, screw you. That's not accurate. Russia has reduced oil production 3 times in the last 18 months. It's down by over 1 million barrels a day. So that's simply not accurate, Addison. They've gone along with it. Right? Where'd advance? Exactly, Miguel. Exactly. You listen to the Trumpists, all you're going to hear are Russian talking points. Russian talking points. Someone made a deal, milady. Maybe the Saudis were worried that we wouldn't protect them from Hamas and Hezbollah or some shit. I don't know. Or they want us on their side for the conflict in the Middle East. Don't know. It could be that. Could be that. That's a good point. Russia is buying votes in Moldova. Like, not a joke, not metaphorically. They are literally paying $115 for you to vote for their candidate in Moldova. Over 130,000 accounts of Moldovan citizens have received just over $15 million from the Russian Federation. That's $115 for each vote. Unbelievable. It's unbelievable. But this is the cynicism with which the Kremlin treats democracy, right? They don't think that people can think for themselves because they keep their own people information poor and poorly educated. They don't think people can think for themselves. They don't think that there is any groundswell. Oh, Mr. Global 2 is here. Hey, pal, do you want to come on? I got 2 things to talk about, but I would love to hear your thoughts on why Saudi Arabia is increasing oil production today. That strikes me. Is it because of Russia's close ties with Iran and because Iran is the enemy of Saudi Arabia? Why have they suddenly changed gears and stopped implicitly supporting Russia and jumped on the bandwagon to start producing more oil and taking some profit? We'll see. I got 2 things left. The EU has suspended all high-level talks with Georgia because of the Georgia Dream Party, because of the reactionary nature of the parliamentarian crisis in Georgia right now. The EU has suspended all high-level talks with Georgia. They haven't exactly cut diplomatic ties, but this would be the first step in that process. Lithuania, this is my favorite one of the day. Clay, you're going to love this one. So you know there's Kaliningrad, the Russian exclave, and to get to Kaliningrad on a train, you got to go through Lithuania. So Russian trains transit through Lithuania all the time to get to Kaliningrad. Dig this. The Lithuanians stopped a train that was painted with Z markings, right? Pro-war Russian symbols, the Z, and made the drivers wash it off the train before they would let it transit through Lithuania. God, I love the Baltics, baby. Love the Baltics. How is the guarantee that they will vote if it's a secret voting? I don't know, man. I have no idea how they cheat like that or how they do that. I have no idea. Maybe if Russia loses, they come to your house and shoot you. Could be that simple. They bought 130,000 votes. In Moldova, they ought to win, right? Anyway, so who does Trump owe the most money? That's a great question. I don't know what happened. There was a $400 million loan from Deutsche Bank that was due like a couple years ago. I don't know what happened with that. Maybe you're right. Maybe the Saudis are afraid of a Trump presidency. Maybe they're acting against a Trump presidency. Or maybe they think that Trump is doomed to lose. And so they're thinking, well, we better ramp up production now so that we can start making money by the time the election's over. We'll start getting the supply out there. Or maybe they're back to their old plan, right back before the war, back before the full-scale invasion. Not everybody remembers this, but Mr. Global did a nice walkthrough on it the other day. MBS and Russia had a price war, and they essentially, it appears that what it was a conspiracy to bankrupt American shale oil production. And they very nearly succeeded. If it weren't for COVID dropping the bottom out of oil and gas demand, they very well might have succeeded in bankrupting American shale production. Now, it could be that MBS is just back to that plan, that he's looking at the election. He knows in 30 days Trump is either going to be in or he's not. It's either going to be good for him or it's not. And so he knows he can't count on Russia. They're lost. So there's nothing there. So he's clearly acting in his own best interest. And the Iranian thing is undoubtedly playing into that, especially when he's been actively trying to normalize relationships with Israel and stabilize the region. So, guys, just before we go to full-on Q&A, let me give a big shout-out to the sponsors of this live, the board of directors, 5 guys who have been absolutely instrumental in keeping this channel afloat for the last year. My buddy Bobby, Ballerina, Fitz, Jason Willis-Starrin, and Lars from Encino Tech. You guys are the best. I really appreciate it. Then, of course, the moderator team, best moderator team on the Tickety Talk. Vanetta, Cheyenne, PT, Jay, and Travis. And, of course, Lars, who has the Discord server and the Alexievich archive. Vanetta, who's got our Google Doc share where you can get email message templates to Congress, the Senate, and the White House regarding the situation here in Ukraine. And big thanks to Nightshade, who has the Peter's Peeps public group over on the Book of Faces, where these lives get posted afterward. Okay, questions, comments, points of observation, or personal need. Anything from anybody about anything? I have no sponsors for next week's lives. So if anybody would like to sponsor a live, the PayPal is in the description. And we'll never know the damage Trump has done nationally or globally. It's a huge amount of damage. Make no mistake. Thanks, Fitz. Sure appreciate it. Has Russia made any advance in Ukraine in the last 6 months? Yeah, Mike, it's about, I want to say 35 kilometers at one point on the front line. But it's taken them 6 months to do it. And that's the Pokrovsk salient. If you look on a map for Pokrovsk and then you just look east of that, you'll see this big bulge of Russian forces trying to get to Pokrovsk. Those forces lost 14,000 men in September alone. The attrition rates, the loss of life, the loss of equipment is enormous for no real gain. Now, legitimately, if they take Pokrovsk, it's a logistics hub for the Donbass. So for Ukraine having Pokrovsk, holding Pokrovsk, awesome, Paul, thanks. Holding Pokrovsk would interrupt Ukrainian supply lines. They'll have to drive a lot farther out of the way than they would otherwise have to. How about the power infrastructure in Ukraine for the moment? What is the state of it now? We haven't been suffering blackouts. The blackouts have pretty much stopped. Occasionally the power goes out for a little bit, but the last 2 weeks, it's right back on. Now, tonight we had something happen that never happens. I lost internet access. The internet just seems to be out. That's very unusual. The big concern I think that we have is with the heating. Heating here is centralized. There are these huge plants that provide heat for whole cities. And those have all been destroyed. 80% of them anyway. So the big concern, Flippy, is the heat. What are your thoughts on Israel's retaliatory strike on Iran? What types of targets are they likely to hit? Colin, I don't know anything at all about the conflict in the Middle East. I'm a one-issue channel. I talk about Iran only in terms of how it affects Ukraine. Right now, PT there is making a distinction about how we drop these big bombs, right? To drop the mother of all bombs in Afghanistan in 2017, the U.S. used a C-130 Hercules. Huge, right? The ODAB 9000 cannot be dropped by any of the planes that were on radar that day. It's just that simple. So despite the fact that the Russians are making the claim that that's what they dropped, they have yet to provide a technical explanation of how that was possible. Unarmed Ukraine people, did you see that video? No, I don't know what you're talking about. Are the Russians using mostly Russians now to fight, or are they still able to recruit others? Oh, they are still able to recruit others, Clay. As I understand it, the drone factory that makes the Shahed knockoffs that the Russians are producing is largely staffed by Ugandan women whose husbands are all in the military. And we just saw the North Koreans get unalived in Donetsk. We saw the capture of a bunch of Africans in the Kursk direction. Well, in Volchansk direction, if I'm not mistaken. So no, they're still doing everything that they can. And Colin, I'm sorry, I don't mean to I'm not trying to cop out, man. It's just that I really don't know anything. I don't study it like I study Ukraine. I only am aware of how the things that happen there can impact Ukraine. Do you think the nuclear plant in Ukraine will survive? Which one? There are 4. One of them is under Russian control, and the Russians keep sending drones at it in these false flag attacks. So it's all up to the Russians. It's all up to the Russians. Oh, did we have a big solar flare? Did we have a coronal mass ejection today? I don't know. I didn't see that. Thanks, Colin. Heard they are trying to return Nepalese men back home since they got lied to by orcs and promised jobs. Yep. Same with the Indians, right? One of the reasons that India is souring on Russia is that a whole bunch of its citizens disappeared into Ukraine. That number is as high, the numbers that I've seen, generally speaking, the official number is very low, but then you see estimates by intelligence experts that put the number as high as 15,000 Indians may have disappeared in Ukraine. 15,000. There were 35 Russian agents arrested in India for doing recruiting, and they had been doing recruiting for 6 months. Don't be afraid of the nuclear plants. Don't be afraid of it. We cannot be afraid of it. Northern Lights in Belgium. Ooh, a romantic evening with the wife, Flippy. Nice. Moldova worries me. Kicking Russians out from Transnistria would be a major, I don't know if it would be a major setback, but it would be a setback. And it's something that has to happen, right? It's definitely something that has to happen. What happens if they hit those plants? You're still talking about the nukes? Well, first of all, the nukes are under hardened concrete domes, right? The nuclear facilities here. So the first thing is you have to be able to get a missile in. You got to get a bunker buster in that can pierce the concrete dome. Then it's got to be strong enough to get through and do some damage to the plant and the reactor underneath. And the Ukrainians are watching this shit, right? So you're going to have to send a missile, and Ukrainian air defense is going to try to intercept that missile. And Ukrainian air defense has a high interception rate. Hey, Robbo, Paul makes the point that the wind blows east. And so any radiation, any contamination is going to go right back to Mother Russia. And Paul, you're right 90% of the time. But there is this thing that happens when the jet stream dips below the Black Sea. It sort of hits the Caspian Sea then, where it deflects back and comes back at Ukraine. Right now, we are in that pattern. Right now, and for the next several days, the wind is coming from the east. And it's been such a dry, hot summer that what we're getting here in Kyiv is dust and sand from the Caspian Sea. There's a fine coat of it on everything, right? All my windows I got to wash the windows. All my windows are covered in this dust. And this dust is coming from the east. So while you're right, for the most part, the jet stream blows west. When we get these high pressure systems that depress it south of the Black Sea, we get a boomerang effect and it comes back at us. You can be sure the Russians are watching the weather. If they're going to hit a nuclear plant, they're going to make sure that the wind is blowing in the right direction to prevent that from happening. No, Clay, I'm not doing lives on YouTube. Nobody's interested. Nobody shows up. And it's a lot more work. But every time I get banned here, I'll go over there so that there's no interruption in the data. Kamala has live show. Does she? Could it affect China? Could a nuclear disaster in Ukraine affect China? Absolutely. Fitz, I can tell you, I'm not going to remember it right now, but when Chernobyl happened, there were dairy cows in Pennsylvania that they found, I want to say, is it cesium-128? I want to say it was dairy cows in Pennsylvania tested positive for cesium, for some cesium isotope that originated at Chernobyl. That's a real thing. So yeah, China will be, the whole world will be affected. It takes a little longer for it to get to the southern hemisphere because of the way the jet stream works. But eventually, even some of the radiation will be felt in Australia and New Zealand. Well, Miguel, trying to predict where fallout will go is a fool's game because it all depends on the wind that day. There are at least 15 days a year where instead of boomeranging back at us here, like I said, the jet stream does sometimes when it dips south of the Black Sea, instead of that, the jet stream kind of floats over the Black Sea. And when it hits the Caspian Sea, what happens? It suddenly takes a right angle and heads straight to Moscow. You time this thing wrong, you'll irradiate fucking Moscow. That's the reality. All we are is dust in the wind. Hey, Steve with a V. Good night, Clay. Thanks, Pedro. Cesium-137. Thanks, be nice. Fukushima is another great example of that. Oh, Dusty, there's no doubt that if there's a radiological event in Ukraine, it will be the cause of the Russians, and they will try to blame the Ukrainians. I mean, they blame you for this war, right? Stop punching yourself. Stop punching yourself. Stop punching yourself. Stop punching yourself. Fucking hell, these people. Sweden got a lot of Chernobyl, and Sweden's due north. 2 days after Chernobyl, it was in Belgium, 2,000 kilometers east. Hey, Wanpa. They will always blame someone else. Yep. Thanks, Bip. All right. So, guys, it is past the top of the hour here. I want to thank everybody. I want to thank everybody for hanging out. Thanks to the moderator team. Thanks to the board of directors, Ballerina, Bobby, Fitz, Jason Willis-Starr, and Lars from Encino Tech. Thank you all very much. Thanks to Lars with the Discord server. And guys, again, if anybody can sponsor a live next week, the PayPal is in the description. If you are a regular follower and have not joined the Patreon, if you can kick me $5 a month, it makes a difference. It makes a difference. Anybody who wants to know how much I make, just go and look at my Patreon. That's what I live on in Ukraine every day, every month rather. Letters to Congress. Vanetta put the link down there. Again, make sure to go to the Google Doc share where you can get our email message templates to Congress, the Senate, and the White House for all things Ukraine, particularly to take the gloves off, to unfetter Ukraine so that they can use those weapons they've been given in the way that they see best. Thanks, everybody. Make it a great day.